chosen sport by training and racing with singular focus, changing the strategy when the playing field was constantly shifted. But the most defining characteristic of Lance will be his dogged determination. First, refusing to accept death when it looked certain. Then Lazarus-like and reborn, dominating and conquering 100 years of history and the greatest cycling race on earth. Today, Lance Armstrong completes the circle of his journey and of his sporting career. Today, he will parade on the fabled cobblestones one final time. Savor the last pedal strokes of Lance Armstrong in his final Tour de France. Now on OLN. This is the Saab Tour pre-race show, and the setting could not be more grand nor more appropriate for a finish like today. Stage 21, a ceremonial procession to Paris, France. Our OLN mobile studio is on the Champs-Élysées, will all unfold with 8 laps of honor for Lance Armstrong, and there are even other stories today. Welcome to the Grand Boulevard through this great city and to OLN's coverage of Stage 21 of the 2005 Tour de France. Hi, everybody. I'm Al Troutwig. My favorite word to describe what we're going to see today is denouement. One last great act, one final chapter in a fabulous story. And since 1999, the world of sports, especially the world of cycling, has marveled at what Lance Armstrong has been able to accomplish. This really isn't about legacy today. The legacy of Lance Armstrong was cemented yesterday with one more amazing individual effort. Let's go to Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwen, and Bob Roll. Where do we start today? What would you like to begin talking about?
Just the magnificent way he came here to win the race. He always told us it wasn't going to be a great hurrah around the roads of France. He came to win. And if they thought he didn't, they found out on the very first day.
Paul, I used the word ease, and as I also qualify, that's not a word that goes into this tour, but it did feel that way.
Well, Lance himself would say it's never easy. You know, it's not easy to win the Tour de France, but he made it look easy. I think that's the important thing. To me, what I'm taking away from this tour is the fact that he never really seemed to be challenged at all. And once again, as since 1999, he's never had any bad luck at all out on the roads like so many of his opposition did.
How would you describe the Lance that we saw yesterday in the individual time trial?
I don't think we've ever seen Lance go harder. He was twisted in pain as he came down the last couple of kilometers. We've never seen Lance turn himself inside out like that, but he wanted to honor the yellow jersey. He wanted to add some panache to his 7th win, and an individual stage win in the time trial, especially the last one, was the way to do it, and Lance got it done.
Yesterday, a couple of things. Ivan Basso still needs to work on his time trialing. Jan Ullrich did look like the Kaiser, and Michael Rasmussen crumbled under the pressure of maybe finishing on the podium today. Here's how it looked and how it felt and how it sounded in Rasmussen's first few miles. And it got worse after that. A flat, 1 bike, 2 bikes, 3 bikes. Uncomfortable with the bike he was riding, unable to handle it around a turn. Inglorious is a word that comes to mind. Sympathetic is what we should be. Then there was Lance Armstrong. Out of the start house, the last to go. At the first time check, he found out in this sea of yellow that he was 7 seconds slower than Ivan Basso. But this was more than 30 miles, not 10 or 15, and Armstrong, through the showers and the insanity, pedaled on, eventually passing Michael Rasmussen and blasting to the finish in a car that was ripped to show number 7 was official. Across the finish line, Armstrong beating Jan Ullrich by 23 seconds, Vinokurov by 1:16, Bobby Julich by 1:33, and Ivan Basso by 1:54. Pacific Life takes us through the standings. After stage 20, here we go. Armstrong beating, as I said, Ullrich, Vinokurov, Julich, and Basso. And after that, you look all the way down to the minutes lost by Michael Rasmussen. Here's the change now to the general classification. Lance jumps to 4:40 in front of Basso. Ullrich 6:21. That's how it'll finish today. Mancebo and then Michael Rasmussen falling all the way down to 7th. Now, let's go after the race and hear to some of the important figures in Lance's world. Lance on the podium, getting the yellow jersey once again, just a few days in this tour without the yellow jersey. And now Johan Bruneel sums up what we've seen.
No, the final few kilometers were great, you know, because with the time check on top of the climb and with 15K to go to the finish, we knew that he was going to win the time trial, and I just told him not to take any risks and just maintain the advantage. So it was the last few kilometers were really I enjoyed it a lot. The stress was gone. You know that the hardest part of the tour is over, and on top of that, he was going to win the time trial. So it was great. It was a special feeling.
And I know today was important for him in more than one way, in that he really wanted to win this stage because he hasn't won a stage in this tour, and also because his children are here and they were waiting for him at the finish line, and it was just a really big moment for him. And I think his kids really, particularly Luke, really began to understand what Daddy's been doing when he's been gone today at this race, and seeing how many people were waiting for his dad to come across the finish. And it just was a big moment.
It's nice just to be done, to be retired and move on in life and take care of these three guys.
All right, well, you got to celebrate it with them. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Well, one of my favorite shots was seconds after finishing the time trial. Lance Armstrong came around the corner. His three kids were there. And you know those candies they throw off the caravan, the Haribo candies? His little son Luke was like, "Dad, look at the candy I got."
Who cares whether he wins the Tour de
Exactly.
France?
Now, I'm looking down at the general classification. Lance is going to have his champagne today, but for Levi Leipheimer, top 5 is a big deal. He's got that by 2 seconds over Alexander Vinokourov and just a few more seconds over Michael Rasmussen. That is something that could dramatically change, and that's going to be something to watch down the last stretch of the cobbles.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't like to be going for that first time bonus sprint this afternoon, because, you know, you've got 3 sprinters who'll be going for the points there for the green jersey race, Hushoff, McEwen and O'Grady. You're going to have Alexander Vinokourov thinking about the 6 seconds, because 6 seconds could move him up and knock Levi Leipheimer down. That's going to be the first bunch sprint of the day. We'll probably have 3 this afternoon.
Almost unpredictable.
Well, Levi was in a similar situation a couple of years ago, trying to stay in the top 10 on GC. Roberto Eras was right behind him. Roberto Eras just in the rotation of the U.S. Postal Team at that year. He came through and got a time bonus out on the course and came within 1 second of Levi Leipheimer. So hopefully today he'll be paying a little bit better attention.
Let's get a final report before stage 21 from our trio of reporters, Craig, Frankie, and Kirsten.
I'm standing here at the finish of the Tour de France, and if you think about which teams performed great in this year's Tour, Team Discovery will come to the front of your mind. But very close behind is Team CSC. From their first day performance with David Zabriskie winning the time trial, wearing the yellow jersey, their incredible performance in the team time trial, Jens Voigt with yellow, strong performances by Julich and Basso in the mountains, and so close to stage wins for Arvidsson and Sorensen. The icing on the cake, Ivan Basso second overall in this year's Tour. In addition, Team CSC has just signed Ivan Basso for another 3 years. So next year, when they're flying up and down here on the Champs-Élysées, I think we'll be able to see Ivan Basso and Team CSC with yellow on their shoulders.
Both Americans, Levi Leipheimer and Floyd Landis, came to this year's Tour with new teams and new goals, and both found success. For Floyd Landis, being a leader on Team Phonak meant he could finally show what he was capable of. He told me this year was a huge test for him, that he truly did not know what it would take of himself to win a Tour. He wanted a top 10 finish. He finishes 9th overall, but more importantly, he has the information he needs of himself and his team to go for a podium next year. As for Levi Leipheimer, who finished 9th for Rabobank last year, he wanted more of himself this year. He wanted a top 5. Although he was not the clear leader for Gerolsteiner at the beginning of the Tour, he proved deserving of it in the mountains and showed the world every day that he has learned from his experience and deserved to be in the top 5, which is exactly what he got. With Lance Armstrong out of the running, it will be interesting to see if an American can podium next year.
After 21 days, over 2,000 miles, and close to 83 hours of racing, it's finally time for Lance Armstrong and his teammates to taste the fruits of their labor. It may be a one-month race, but Johan Brunel and the rest of the Discovery Channel organization work 12 months a year to make sure the traditional victory parade into Paris takes place with the yellow jersey firmly planted on Lance's shoulders. Now, it may be raining, but expect the champagne to flow, smiles to be everywhere, and the boys to be decked out in gold, whether it be their bikes or their uniforms, as they streak onto the Champs-Élysées and celebrate a milestone that may never be reached again. For Lance Armstrong and his team, it's party time, and it's well-deserved.
And Craig, expect Discovery to have a special look fashion-wise. Expect Lance to look special from his helmet all the way down to his shoes, and we'll have it all covered in Stage 21. As we continue to look back at Lance Armstrong's career, sometimes it takes one great champion, like recent British Open champion Tiger Woods, to put things in perspective. We'll be right back.
Just forget about the cancer for a moment, but to do what he's done and to do something that no one else in the history of his sport has ever done, to win six tours, I mean, come on. That's one of the ultimate endurance races, and the will it takes to win something like that, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And for him to do that, not once, but 6 times, then you add in the fact that he was almost dead and had to come back from cancer, it only adds to the whole legacy.
Welcome back to Paris and our coverage of Lance's ride to the Champs-Elysees wearing the yellow jersey for a 7th consecutive time before he retires from the sport. Now, the look that Lance has had has featured much symbolism, and the same people who gave Michael Jordan his distinctive look are behind Lance's look. With the people of Trek, of course, they have given his bike special treatment. Let's go to Kirsten Gum, who saw things behind the scenes yesterday.
There is nothing like going out in style, and Lance Armstrong is about to do just that. He will roll onto the Champs-Elysees with a newly designed Trek bike. Now, it's just like his wheel on his time trial bike and the decals he's had over the past several days. It is all about iconography and Lance's story. This is the bike. It just got here a few hours ago. We're giving you a sneak peek. Lance himself hasn't even seen it. And check it out on the top tube. The 7 wins of the Tour de France. On the down tube, many more icons that mean something to Lance Armstrong. Soon, you too will be able to pick out icons that mean something to you through the Trek website. It's called Project One. You will also be able to wear Lance's story. Nike recently released his new line. It's called 10-2, the day that he was diagnosed with cancer. And part of it will be these shirts, each explaining his wins. And as you can guess, there will be a series of 7.
Would you be able to come up with symbols for your life to put on your bike?
No.
No. Yeah, the last one is sort of neat. It's a bicycle wheel with 7 spokes for each of the 7 wins, and that's the last one they put on the bicycle. Meanwhile, it is time on the final day of the tour to go to our Saab Performance Predictions, the race for the OLN yellow jersey. Oh, it was statement day yesterday. Paul Sherwen somehow was able to pick Lance Armstrong, pulling away from Phil Liggett, 29-24. Bob Roll got 3 points, and I gave it up. I couldn't take it anymore. So this means that it's time for the presentation of the yellow jersey. Phil, your thoughts?
It ain't over. It ain't over.
I've been ripped off by the draw and by tactical voting by Phil Roll.
The whining, it's unbelievable. The wine has turned to champagne today, however, on the last day.
He can fight back. There's another day. Today is the last day.
The first
Courage,
pick.
mon ami.
Yeah, well, listen to what Bob's going to say.
Yeah,
now.
Bob's got the first pick today, please.
I get to pick first, and I'm going with Robbie McEwen. I'm sorry, Phil. My man is the fastest man left in the bike race. Robbie McEwen going to the line hard. He's going to win the stage. I'm sorry, Phil.
Phil, you need a win.
Well, who's second? Me?
Yes.
I'm going to take Tor Hushoff. He's got the green jersey. I think he'll win it now, in all honesty, but I'll still lose the yellow jersey competition. Go for it, Tor.
Tactically, I've got a good lead, but I've got to get a couple of points this afternoon. I've got to go with Stuart O'Grady because he too is battling it out for the green jersey points classification. All I need, Stewie, is 1 point if Tor Hushoff wins.
See, this is why I abandoned. There's nobody left, even if I was going to pick.
Well, that's what my situation was yesterday.
What if these cobblestones...
Why didn't you pick Vinnycura?
What if the cobblestones are slippery?
Good idea.
Good point. Good point.
They were in 1977. Oh, you weren't here then, were you? No.
Please. Paul, please take us to the map.
Well, for the last time, the rider's pulling out from the starting gate, and it's going to be an interesting route. Moving away from the start from Corbeil-Essonnes, the map brought to us by Mitchum shows us it's a rather intricate and difficult course over the early part. Very much in town until they get to the Seine, and then it's the Voie Georges Pompidou all the way along. You get to see all the magnificent sights, although at 55 kilometers an hour, it's really difficult to appreciate them. And finally, once you get right the way along to the Place de la Concorde, you move inland a fraction. And then you circumnavigate the Jardin des Tuileries right in front of the Louvre, and it's back down onto the Champs-Elysees. And that is where every bike rider in the world wants to finish. And have a quick look at that. It's 144 kilometers. The distance, 144 kilometers, brought to us by AMD. The explanation is it's 89.5 miles, and that's roughly the distance between Chicago and Milwaukee. Last time we had a win on the Champs-Élysées, in fact, we have a win every year on the Champs-Élysées, 12 months ago, Tom Boonen, no longer with us.
Today's pretty romantic, a lot like Chicago to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Now, why would you want to say that you remember 1977? I mean, that would mean that you're like 62 years old now.
You're right.
Hit it on the... How did you know that?
I think we're ready to watch it. When does Champagne come out?
Well, in my case, it's not going to come out. I've lost the yellow jersey.
Oh, fight back. Give it up. Fight back. Courage. Go for it.
Courage. That's the spirit of the Tour de France.
It's time for a break on the Saab Tour pre-race show. Once again, putting things in perspective, one great athlete to another. Here's Wayne Gretzky.
We compare guys like Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus because that's what we do. We love sports. We love to sit around and say, who was the greatest player ever? Was it Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus? Was it Larry Bird or Magic Johnson? Was it Borg or McEnroe? And everyone has their own opinions, and that's what makes sports so wonderful. And we are always trying to find legends because we strive to have heroes, and we strive to see superstars be successful. I think in Lance's case, in my mind, he was a legend when he beat cancer. To go on and win 6, I think he's obviously in a league of his own, and I wish him all the best in winning the 7th. I think it'd be something really unbelievable.
There's one of the absolute must-do things in Paris. After 93 miles, the finish line, and there is the Arc de Triomphe at the top of the Champs-Élysées. A little cloudy today, a little spritzing going on. We'll see if that affects anything today on OLN. This was the scene this morning just outside of Paris at Corbeil-Essonnes, and look at the attraction, well-deserved for Lance Armstrong.
Pandemonium breaking loose as the photographer is struggling to get a photo of the only man in the history of humankind to win 7 tours. You might not get a chance to take a photo like that for a very long time.
Looking toward the sky, wondering what was to come, and in fact there was a little bit of rain. There's the green jersey wearer, Thor Hushovd, and the king of the mountains, Michael Rasmussen, and that's the way it should begin. Don't try this at home. Signing a credential for the cameraman in mid-flight.
A tour champion's work is never done. Even on the last day, signing autographs on the fly. My man has got some skills, or what?
Now here's the outgoing race director, Jean-Marie LeBlanc, with a handshake for Lance.
Tremendous amount of mutual respect between those two great champions in their own right. Lance, number 7, baby.
Look at the smile on Ivan Basso's face. So they're going for the symbolism in every way today as they make their way toward Paris. And now we'll see what's going to develop. We have the prestige of the green jersey that could be challenged. Thor Hushovd has a lead over Stuart O'Grady of 15 points and Robbie McEwen of 21. You get 35 for a stage win, so that could all change. The peloton remains intact, and where would we be without one last shot of Thomas Voeckler on the right? A little under 86 miles to go. They'll do 8 laps in Paris, and last year we saw those laps had unbelievable energy to them. But the cobblestones are slick.
Tremendous amount of aggressive racing last year. Very similar conditions. Rainy at the start, clearing in the afternoon. We'll see if that plays out today. And the same man in the yellow jersey, Lance Armstrong. But you're right, it was a very aggressive stage. A lot was at stake last year, including the green jersey, similar to today. Also, Alexander Vinokourov finds himself 2 seconds behind 5th place on GC. The top 5 at the Tour is an incredible accomplishment. Vinokourov and Levi Leipheimer separated by only 2 seconds after it's all said and done. Over 2,000 miles of racing. That's pretty amazing.
For every rider that finishes the Tour de France, a sense of accomplishment and a little bit of survivor thrown in. 2,241 miles, nothing doing. This is a day where you just let it wash all over you. Some of the cyclists even had portable cameras that they take pictures of as they make their way to Paris. And that just landmarks really develop. This is Lance on his last day. We'll be back after this on OLN. Back with more of the Tour in prime time, and this really is fun to watch. From village to village on the outskirts of Paris, Lance Armstrong proudly wearing Le Maillot Jaune at the front of the peloton. There's been no breakaway. We don't expect there to be any sort of funny stuff until Paris and the 8 laps on the Champs-Élysées. And he's been spending a lot of time, Bob, in the front with Jan Ullrich, and they really seem to have been having a lot of fun talking to each other. What do you think the topics include?
It was interesting to see Jan Ullrich come forward and shake Lance's hand, and he said overnight in the papers that it's an honor to race against Lance. Obviously, the last 7 times in the Tour, he's been the stronger man. And hats off and congratulations to Lance Armstrong on 7 tours. So very nice sportsmanship on the part of the German champion, Jan Ullrich.
Interesting for Lance Armstrong in that this was not a tour in which they were pushing him as hard as they could. In fact, on the very first day, you got an indication of how things were going to go.
The start out of stage 1, this is where you put up or shut up. For Lance, after only 19 days of pre-tour racing, it was a test of whether his preparation was right. Pre-race, he said he felt 100% ready. Despite a bobble out of the starting gate, the confirmation of that came when he overtook the man expected to be his major rival, leaving Ullrich in his dust. Armstrong crossed the line in 2nd place. The race was on, and he passed the first test with flying colours.
And you could almost imagine Jan Ullrich saying to Lance, yeah, I know you beat me, but did you have to pass me in that first stage?
Well, time waits for no man.
And one by one now, this is almost like the Grand Patron moment.
Yeah.
As Ullrich peels away, allowing Vinokurov to come up and say his piece.
I'm not sure what congratulations is in Kazakhstan, but Vinokurov speaks pretty good English, so does Jan Ullrich, even though he won't talk to us unless we get a German-speaking reporter.
Now remember, Alexander Vinokurov, who I think was the most aggressive rider toward Lance in this tour, he only trails 5th place Levi Leipheimer by 2 seconds. Do you think top 5 is a big deal to a guy who wants to win this thing?
For Vinokurov, I think he's happy to have won a stage and finish in the top 10 on GC, and I think that next year, and that's a good point that you bring up, next year we will have a very dynamic race, and it'll change the complexion of who is going to chase down what attacks, and it's going to be a race that changes entirely. We'll have a completely different set of tactical circumstances in next year's tour because we don't have the grand patronage of that man in the yellow jersey who just went flashing by the camera, having a nature break, motorcyclists in the field. We won't have the juggernaut, if you will, of the Discovery team throbbing down the road, just throttling the highway day in and day out. A rider like Ivan Basso has used that to gain time on Jan Ullrich, and Jan Ullrich, on the other hand, hasn't been able to follow the tempo set by not just Lance, but his Discovery teammates. If Ivan Basso doesn't have that advantage, it will be a completely different type of a bike race. Here's a mountains competition. Rasmussen winning that easily over Oscar Pereiro, and Lance Armstrong himself in 3rd place because he's so consistent in the mountains. Christophe Moreau, Michael Bugert rounding out the top 5 in the King of the Mountains, but that competition will be won by Michael Rasmussen, who had a disastrous time trial yesterday. Vinokurov saying congratulations to Lance, and there he is back on his bike, coming back into the peloton. Maybe now a moment for champagne. The tour will be different in many ways next year because of the tempo that's set throughout the start, early stages, and throughout the mountain stages by the team of Lance Armstrong. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes whether or not Ivan Basso has a better chance to win or a worse chance compared to a guy like Jan Ullrich or Alexander Vinokurov, if Vino finds the good team, the right circumstance to be on next year.
Lance with a specially designed helmet for the occasion. It has a list of all the years, the 7 that he's won the Tour de France on the back, and it's handshakes all around. Can you just, I guess you really can't, the sense of accomplishment that goes in his mind during these miles, the freest and easiest and most joyous, and yet maybe bittersweet a little bit too, miles of his life.
I think mostly sweet for Lance Armstrong. You know, it's an incredible requirement, psychologically, physically, time-wise, and it's a big sacrifice to your family members when you're a professional bike racer. You're gone so much of the time, especially different continents. And so Lance, you came to win. He's saying congratulations. The whole peloton, you really get a sense of how popular he has become with the riders and the respect that is due this man. The only man in the history of cycling to win 7 tours. He was the only man to win 6 last year, and it's a wonderful sense of accomplishment. I think it's going to take us time to really understand, absorb, and be able to comprehend Lance's accomplishments of winning 7 tours.
We're inside the intricacies and subtleties of cycling. It's like watching the French version of The Godfather. There's no doubt who the consigliere is, and everybody is coming to pay their respects to Lance Armstrong on his way to Paris. Welcome back to the ceremonial ride to Paris, also known as Stage 21. And it's official now. The champagne came out a few minutes ago. Johan Brunel in the Discovery team car, passing it out to Lance Armstrong, a toast. And then the entire team passed it out, and then it became one huge photo opportunity.
When the cameramen on the motorbikes get involved with the shots of Lance Armstrong on this day of days, you know that even though there's some nervous moments, generally speaking, the peloton is going at a reasonable tempo. We, for the first time in many, many stages, see nobody in front, nobody with a time gap to the yellow jersey, to the peloton. Everyone tutto compacto. The whole group is together, toasting that man in the middle of your screen, Mr. Lance Armstrong.
It's time now for the Honda highlight. We go back to yesterday, Stage 20, from and to Saint-Etienne. Rolling into the start house and signing in number 1, Lance Armstrong. Out he went, challenged initially by the fast times of Ivan Basso. Through an unbelievable sea of yellow and salute. Across the line, in front of his car that was, for that day, number 7. The stage win, joyous all around. Hey, Dad, look what I got.
Luke is keeping it real right there. Gotta love the publicity caravan at the Tour.
And that is the Honda highlight. Things a little misty, little rain in the air. Let's go back and show you what happened in the team time trial.
In a race that crowns only one man as winner, Stage 4 turns the spotlight for once to the team. All 9 riders leaving together and riding in unison. Lance and his team are returning as double defending champions, having won this stage the past 2 years. And more than ever, they wanted to make a statement. They started slowly, but gradually turned up the heat, posting the fastest time at the finish in Blois and putting their leader into his first yellow jersey of the 2005 Tour. The statement had been made.
And that was Stage 4, a 2-second victory by Team Discovery over Team CSC. It included the crash of David Zabriskie. That was when the yellow jersey changed hands. Lance was never comfortable with that. Jens Voigt then took the yellow jersey, wore it for a day, and then he abandoned right after that. So the only 2 men to wear the yellow jersey other than Lance Armstrong in this Tour de France are not here at the finish. Both were forced to abandon. So the peloton stretches out in this ride toward Paris. Eventually they will reach the outskirts and then 8 laps around the Champs-Élysées. I still think it would be sort of fun if Ulrich or Basso just faked a breakaway.
One thing.
Only kidding.
Just joking. Hide behind a car and think that they had really taken off. It's old school trickery, but I don't think we're going to see that today. Oscar Sevilla and Giovanni Lombardi on the front of the peloton. Speaking Spanish, Lombardi, the Italian, lives in Spain, trains there, races for a Danish team, and Oscar Sevilla, a Spaniard on a German team. And cycling, perhaps the most international sport in the world, with athletes from all over the world on the same team together, competing for different sponsors.
On that rare occasion when you know you're watching one of the all-time greats, still at his all-time best, do what he does best for a last time.
The alpha and omega man of the Tour de France. Lance, in his first professional race, he finished dead last in the Classica San Sebastian. And in his last race, he will finish first. And he was last, will be first. And Lance Armstrong, the greatest champion the Tour de France has ever seen.
a lot different than it was last year when we had tons of great sunshine, but I don't think there's anything that could dampen the mood of the peloton today. Hey, Bob, when you were in the peloton, and we'll look at George Ludwig's heart rate, should be nice and easy, 85 beats per minute. Take us back to when you were in the peloton coming to Paris.
The last time that I raced into Paris in the peloton, we came over the hills south of town by Versailles and cresting the last climb and having Paris in front of the peloton with the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe in the distance. So it was a really incredible moment in my career. And after everything that you go through as a bike racer, the full month of the race, from the prologue, the first stage we saw out in Loire, Moutier, it seems like a lifetime ago. And for the athletes, it seems even longer than that, because you're not just following the race, you're suffering in it all the time. And it is an incredible sense of accomplishment to get over that last climb. Look out, Paris is in front of you, and behind you is all the pain and suffering of everything that goes into getting to those last few pedal strokes around the Champs-Élysées. It's the best moment in a cyclist's career.
So the champagne has been brought to the fore, not far from where it was made, outside of Paris, stage 21. We're joined now by a very successful and longtime coach of Lance Armstrong, Chris Carmichael. And as we watch these easygoing moments for the peloton, smiles, we've had guys singing, I'm singing in the rain even. Chris, tell me about the conversation you had with Lance right before the time trial yesterday.
Well, when Lance was warming up, I went over to him and I said, look, Lance, just win the Tour de France today. And he said, Chris, I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to win the stage. The reason why I said that was it was a very, yesterday's stage was very twisty, turny. It's easy to have an accident, and I wanted him to get through it without any trouble.
Well, he did that, that's for certain. Meanwhile, if you want to test your cycling fitness at thousands of cycling events around the United States, visit active.com and click on the cycling page to find tours, centuries, and races in your neighborhood. Best part is you can register online instantly at active.com. You can also sign up for the daily tour, a free Tour de France newsletter including updates, insightful commentary, that's debatable, and a chance to win great cycling prizes. It's just kidding. It's an exclusive partnership between active.com and OLN. While you're there, click on the Tour de France coverage and then click on daily blogs. That's active.com. So let's stick with the thought of the individual time trial. Compare the strategy that Lance used to, say, Ivan Basso, who went out so hard, actually 7 seconds faster than Lance at the first time check.
Well, that was interesting, and actually it was something that we were kind of hoping might happen. The race really began. The time trial had some good climbs starting about 5K into it yesterday. And at the start, you actually kind of drop downhill a little bit, a false flat sort of rolling down. And it's easy to get too excited and overextend yourself at the start. And if you hit the hill when you start climbing about 5K into it, you're going to chance of going over your, too far above yourself and basically exploding becomes much greater. And so Lance rode really conservative those first 4 or 5 kilometers till you start climbing. And then the plan was to really open it up. And you gain a lot more time on the climbs if you're accelerating all the way up the climb as opposed to getting into it, getting a couple kilometers into it, and then having to explode and just basically going slower every meter thereafter. I think that's what happened to Basso.
When you were monitoring Lance's heart rate and during the warm-up process yesterday before the time trial, did you see a good indication that his feelings that he had that he was getting from his body were consistent with what you thought would transpire in the race?
Yeah, his heart rate was coming up nice. It never comes up as it does at the beginning of the tour because he's so fresh. But at the end, it was still coming up pretty nicely.
Let's go back and show you the day where, in reality, Lance clinched this tour, stage 10.
The first day in the Alps, stage 10 to Courchevel, would be the final day for many Tour aspirations. On the last climb, Lance was in a select group of nervous Tour hopefuls. As the pressure increased, riders began to crack. Armstrong sensed the weaknesses and urged his teammate Jaroslav Popovic to give it all he had. The acceleration cracked the field, and at the finish, Armstrong attacked first. Only Alejandro Valverde could respond. The Spaniard bettered the Texan at the line, but Armstrong, with possibly his most aggressive riding ever, had slaughtered his opponents and taken back the maillot jaune.
And looking back on it, Lance put some bonus time on his advantage yesterday, but that was the day in this tour, wouldn't you say?
You know, it's interesting, but it was. I mean, it was the day that he gained the most amount of time on his chief opponents on that day.
Chris Carmichael will stay with us as you look at the relief, the smiles, and the sense of accomplishment in the peloton. Lance in yellow, riding into Paris. Lance Armstrong being congratulated by virtually every member of the peloton. Now riding in the midst of it, team cars at the back. The caravan is making its way onto the finish line here on the Champs-Élysées. You may be hearing that. Al Troutwig, Bob Roll, and Chris Carmichael. And Chris, I wonder, did we see Lance Armstrong at his absolute maximum yesterday, or was it not necessary?
He was at his maximum. He was at his max. I mean, that was a very challenging time trial. He was pushed. He knew he had to gain his time on the uphills, and he also knew that descent, those descents pretty, so he was able to barrel down them very quickly.
One more Lance moment from the tour, stage 14.
There will be bodies everywhere on the Cavaliers.
He knew it was coming, and on the slopes of the Porte de Payer, the attacks came thick and fast. The pink jersey T-Mobile riders of Ulrich are breaking this field apart.
They have isolated Armstrong. Armstrong now has no teammates left at all.
In the midst of the storm, Armstrong remained calm, caught back onto his rivals, and descended towards Axe-les-Thermes with the imminent fireworks of the final climb still ahead. As Georg Kochnik took the stage win ahead, this time it was Armstrong being the aggressor, shedding all but Ivan Basso, crossing the line to take second and widen his lead over all of his rivals.
Yet another big day, stage 14, and once again for Lance, it was absolutely flawless. It was just filled with all sorts of enormous effort, and it was one of those rare moments when Discovery was not there to surround him totally. So there'll be a party tonight?
Yes, absolutely.
And there'll be no cycling tomorrow?
No riding tomorrow.
That's unbelievable.
I think Lance is gonna, I don't think you'll see him swing a leg over his bike for a while. But, you know, he's not the guy that's gonna lay around and get fat and gain 30, 40 pounds like other athletes have done. And
like me and you, Chris.
like, well, you know, me, you, and other guys that actually rode the bike much better than us. He's gonna stay fit.
List of your stage winners. Stage 9, Milos Rasmussen, Valverde. Great stage win. Courchevel, Vinokourov over the Galibier. Moncoutier on Bastille Day. Robbie McEwen in a big sprint. Stage number 13. Georg Tochnik to Aitois Domain, which we just saw. Lance demolished the field once again. George Hincapie, Plata Day. Oscar Pereira won his stage number 16. Paolo Savidelli in a tense sprint with Arvidsson into Revel. Marco Serrano and Mond. Giuseppe Guerini, great little win for the Italian on the T-Mobile squad. And of course, in yesterday's time trial, Lance Armstrong reigned supreme. Ivan Basso there. Kid, we talked a lot about Ivan Basso's giving an indication on yesterday's time trial whether or not he's capable of winning the Tour de France eventually. What did you take away from that experience? He started really fast, kind of faded a little bit, was decent, but maybe a little bit below expectations.
Well, it is interesting. I expected a better time trial from Ivan Basso, and I think he was disappointed. He probably started a little too hard. I mean, that's a long time trial, especially with all that climbing. You have to you have to be careful, and if you overextend yourself and start to struggle, you're not going to come back in something like that. You're only going to get slower as it goes on. You know, I would not say he is necessarily the heir apparent right now, based upon yesterday's time trial, as the guy from next year. I think it's going to be still up in the air. He's, you know, maybe the Giro wasn't quite the right thing to have him really ready for the Tour, and I think you know, he's got a great director, so I'm sure he's going to circle back with Bjarne Riis and chat about next year as far as how they can target the Tour and what it's going to take to win the Tour. And I think with Lance Armstrong out of the way, you're going to see a lot of guys much more excited about the Tour de France.
Well, Chris, it's been really fun hearing your insights for the past 23 days. Congratulations on the role you played in 7 straight years of Tour wins with Lance. Thank you.
It's been a heck of a ride. It's hard to believe that it's been 7, you know, and now it's coming to that era is coming to an end. And after 15 years, I remember, you know, working with him when he was just turned 18, and it's all ups and downs and challenges and great victories and also disappointments. You know, Lance is a very, very special athlete, and I've been very, very fortunate to work with such a great athlete.
Well, Lance was just talking to, I guess, Johan Brunel through his microphone. Tours started 11. Tours finished 8. Makes you wonder about the 3 he didn't finish. And then, of course, the massive change to his life. He's ridden 21,000 miles in the Tour. The circumference of the Earth is 24,900. 202 stages, 22 of them won, 11 time trials, 83 days in yellow. He's number 2 on the all-time list, and he's had 39 teammates and only one that has ridden with him for all 7 straight tours, and that's George Hincapie. For more information on Chris Carmichael's training tips, and he's gotten some tremendous feedback from cycling fans on the Tour, go to www.trainright.com/OLN. Back on Prime Time with the Tour after this. Back with the Tour in prime time, the final stage, stage 21, Lance in yellow all the way to Paris. This is one of the Category 4 climbs, the only one. A couple of sprints to come, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It'll also be interesting to see if Michael Rasmussen decides to wear his King of the Mountains jersey over this little tiny climb on the way to Paris or not. It doesn't matter. He has clinched it, in spite of what was just a ridiculously horrific individual time trial yesterday.
It shows you how much preparation goes into being competitive at the Tour, not just winning the Tour de France, but also being able to get on the podium. And it didn't seem as if Michael Rasmussen had the right support from his team. The mechanic came running up initially without a spare wheel, even though it was obvious he needed a rear wheel. And then he had to change bikes because the wheel that was put back into his racing machine didn't work with the brakes, and from that point on it kept getting worse and worse, and it was a total disaster. And they didn't have a regular bike for him to ride, and he crashed on the descent. And I think that was because before the Tour, months before the Tour, the preparation necessary to be competitive in this very, very tough event goes on for not just the 3 weeks of the bike race, but it goes on throughout the whole season, preseason, even the selection of the team at the race. And Michael Rasmussen was left lacking there a little bit by his team. And maybe next year they'll have more confidence in him. And if he's doing a time trial for a lot of marbles, a place on the podium in Paris, he will have a spare bike that he's trained on that's 100% ready to go in case he should have a mechanical like he did yesterday after the first crash, and it just went all downhill from there. It turned from disastrous to nightmarish, and Rasmussen plummeting into 7th place on GC from a possible podium at the start of the day.
Lance and Ivan Basso have been chatting up a storm at the front of the peloton for quite a number of miles.
Ivan Basso, the great Italian racer, second in the Tour this year. He's made a steady progression through the rankings, started as 12th in his debut, moved up to 7th and won the white jersey. He was 3rd on the podium last year after losing 2nd place to Andreas Kloden on the very last time trial. And this year he's moved into 2nd place on GC. We were hoping for a little bit more from Basso in the individual time trial yesterday. Jan Ulrich was really, really strong in that. So it'll be a titanic battle between those two men in next year's Tour de France.
See a little nudge from one of the riders in the peloton pushing Lance up front. Get up there where you belong.
The whole world wants to see the Sun King clad in gold, and there he is.
And you wonder, is Basso going to be the man next year, or in the absence of Armstrong, can Ulrich flourish one more time? Have to fill in the blanks a little bit here.
That's the international sign language used by the peloton that a lot of the riders develop when so many languages now are spoken in the bike race. It used to be that everybody studied and learned French and was able to communicate in the international language of cycling, French. And I was never very good at that, so never knew what was going on subsequently. Riders nowadays come from all over the world and speak so many different languages that there isn't a definitive language in the peloton, and a lot of sign language being used. Levi Leipheimer and Ivan Basso in that circumstance, and they're still at the front chit-chatting.
Levi Leipheimer is holding on to a top 5 position. He's in 5th by only 2 seconds, so that could change. He's going to have to be careful. Let's go back and relive Plata Day.
Still get goosebumps when I pass that incredibly beautiful monument. His wife told me to win today.
A special day and a tough request, even for Lance, who had to focus on more immediate concerns.
He gets the big diesel engine going. Another kick from Basso. Armstrong must respond to this.
Armstrong remained in control, but on the final climb went head-to-head with the Italian again. This is an incredible showdown now. Everybody is totally committed. At the line, Armstrong finished in 6th place. He wouldn't win for Fabio. But more importantly, his teammate George Hincapie, also a teammate of Casatelli's, had won the stage. And neither of them could contain their excitement.
And again, Bob, that was the hardest mountain stage without question.
Oh, my God. When I saw the profile of that way back in November, October, when they announced the race route, I felt for the riders back then, and then seeing the athletes go through that absolute carnage to the peloton. George Hincapie had a great day, his best day as a bike racer, won the stage, and it was such a wonderful happenstance because he has been in the service of Lance Armstrong for so many years, 7 now, that it was great to see George get some personal glory after racing so hard, so long, so many miles for that man, number 1, Lance Armstrong.
Lance dropping back, maybe because there's a sprint intermediate coming up. Right now we have something special and unique to talk about. In commemoration of our tour coverage and Lance winning 7 straight tours, OLN had 70 t-shirts made for our crew to wear today. And one of them is signed by all of our announcers, Bob Roll, Phil and Paul, of course. And it's up for auction. 53 miles to go until the final finish line is to be crossed by Lance Armstrong. 8 laps still to come around the Champs-Élysées. It's all ceremonial for Lance today, champagne toasts and all. Stage 21 continues. Al Trawick along with Bob Roll, Phil and Paul, of course, our entire crew all over it today in this ride to Paris that's been damp, chilly, windy, rainy. Little under 46 miles to go, and it's been nothing but easy going at the front. Now, you wonder when it's going to start. But does Gerolsteiner start assembling even now to help Levi hold on to his top 5 finish?
I think that's a great honor for the Gerolsteiner squad, and Levi's there right in front, and so is Alexander Vinokourov. So one would hope that a furious sprint for the green jersey would neutralize any racing for general classification at this point in the bike race, and let's just hope that have gentleman's agreement about that, but we'll see in a few kilometers.
Well, on the cobblestones, you certainly want to stay in front of the action. Now, here's the other jersey to talk about. The green jersey. Thor Hushovd has a lead over Stuart O'Grady of 15 points and Robbie McEwen of 21 points. There's 35 points available at the finish line for the one who crosses first, so it's going to be furious. Then there's 30 for second and 26 for third, so this could all change dramatically if the teams don't do the right thing for Thor Hushovd, Robin McEwen, and Stuart O'Grady. Earlier, one of the cameramen on the motorcycles asked Robin McEwen, is he going to go for it? He said, I'll try my best.
Robbie McEwen, I think, will probably conserve himself along the way for the stage win. He's quite a few points behind Thor Hushovd, who's leading, but Stuart O'Grady has been very aggressive in going for those points out along the race course. I think Thor Hushovd will keep a serious eye on Stuart O'Grady as we get to the two intermediate sprints. 6 points for first on those. And
if he finishes top three, he's locked. Hushovd.
Yes, if he finishes the stage in top three, no one can pass him, no matter how many points they get out on the race course. So maybe that's what he'll shoot for at the end of the day. But if he's not confident in that, or if you have a bit of a problem, or if he doesn't feel like he's sprinting well enough for that, we'll see him go for some out along the race course. He doesn't need to get too many anywhere, the finish or the intermediate sprints along the way during the stage, to lock up that green jersey.
Now there's an intermediate sprint for 6 points up ahead of this rather modest climb. And then after this climb, it is really flat city all the way into Paris.
.44.5 miles to go. The peloton still all together. We've seen a couple of crashes along the way. Terrible way to finish up the tour, falling down. No injuries, substantial anyways. And I myself crashed on the last day of the tour years ago. And
are you still bitter about that?
I'm very bitter because instead of going out dancing, I had to stay in bed with the bandaged up knees. I'm kidding about the dancing.
And now the pace quickens. No doubt about it.
Green jersey riders coming to the front from Pretty Agricole. The green and white jerseys there. Teammates of Thor Hushovd, and we'll see if O'Grady, he's on the Kofidi squad, comes into the picture as well, and we might have a pretty furious dash to the line. There's Thor Hushovd just going through there right in the middle of the screen, about a third of the way down in the peloton.
Lance sort of dropped off the back.
Vino Kurov attacking right now, so he's very serious. There goes the Gerolsteiner team chasing him down. He's going for 5th overall and the Gerolsteiner team now struggling en masse to come back to the Kazakh man. They need a couple of guys to get around him. He's just 2 seconds behind Levi Leipheimer. If he can't get it now, it'll be too late, but he's giving it everything he's got. The Gerolsteiner squad now coming up, more riders getting on the wheel, and Vino Kurov not giving up now, trying to go for 5th place on GC.
Bobby, you were a little surprised as Gerolsteiner really forms behind him that he put this probe in as early as he did. Here's the sprint for the finish.
If he gets this at the line, he will have time bonuses enough to move into 5th place on GC. But look at how serious Gerolsteiner is taking this, and Levi is right on the wheel now. Levi has 3 teammates with him. Now, Levi, if he gets around Vino Kurov, then no problem. He will stay in 5th place on GC. Or if any of his teammates are able to do that, now the attacks are coming. Let's see what Vino Kurov can do. He's going after him as well. You have to be very careful in this situation. You don't want to draw out Vino Kurov with an attack like that. But Levi riding great, right on the wheel of Vino Kurov. Now you need some help from your teammates if you're Levi Leipheimer to try to get around the Kazakh man. You need 2 riders in front of him or Levi himself to come around. This is a very desperate moment for Levi Leipheimer, and we might be seeing him lose 1 place on GC. Here comes another teammate just coming up. They do have a very fast sprinter in Robert Forster. Let's see. This is a long drag up here. This is not a flat sprint by any means. This is a long uphill false flat. Great riding so far. Now here comes attack from one of Levi's teammates, if they can do it.
What's interesting is that there is no pink anywhere to be seen.
Well, Vinokourov is on his own to try to move up one place on GC, that's for sure. Great riding by Levi so far. Levi Leipheimer is not a sprinter. Alexander Vinokourov is a very fast in the sprint in this type of a situation. But now here he goes. Now he's making his move for the line. He's isolated Levi. This is a very tough circumstance for Levi Leipheimer here. If he can get around Vinokourov, he will stay in 5th place overall. This is a battle of wills. Both of them going through 3 weeks of the hardest bike race in the world. This is a real contest for 5th place in the Tour.
100 meters.
Here comes a charge. Vinokourov just barely having enough here to stay ahead of Levi Leipheimer. Levi with the bow of the head, and that we'll have to see how that goes. There's another sprint along the way for time, so this is not over by any stretch of the imagination, and it is obvious that Alexander Vinokourov would love to move up one place on GC. They are exactly tied on time. They're going to have to go back to hundredths of seconds in stage number 1's time trial. I'm a little bit surprised to see Vinokourov race so hard when Levi was able to counter the move and get on his wheel. We'll have to see how that goes to hundredths. The jury's decision is going to be very, very tight on that. Vinokourov sprinted for about 4 kilometers on that. And they have a huge lead on the peloton right now. There's an attack by Gerolsteiner. I think the attacks are going to start coming now. Sprint number 2 is coming up a few kilometers away, and Gerolsteiner maybe not wanting to leave that to chance. They've sent a man up the road. Vinokourov getting the sprint number 1 result there. Levi on his wheel. And this man, Fabian Wegmann, was 3rd on that sprint. Now he's carrying on. He's got a few kilometers to go to the next sprint. So if it does go down to hundredths and Levi can stay in 5th, they want to take that time out right now, and an attack by Wegmann would be able to do that. There's also time bonuses at the finish line, but one would presume that all the sprinters coming to the front of the race would take any time away from a rider like Vinokourov or Levi Leipheimer that are not field sprinters. But this has turned into a very competitive situation. We saw after the time trial that Levi in 5th was very close to Vinokourov in 6th, and now they're exactly tied on time, and it'll be very, very interesting. This is Ronnie Scholes. He's going out on the breakaway now and try to take away any more chances for Vinokourov to get time away from Levi Leipheimer. And there is another sprint. So now we see the attack starting. Discovery team to the front. Lance Armstrong wants to keep things under relative control until they see what kind of breakaway gets established.
The first 3 across the line in an intermediate sprint get 6 seconds, 4 seconds, and 2 seconds. So Levi got 4, Vinokourov got 6, thereby making up the 2 seconds he trailed Levi Leipheimer. So at the next sprint, if a Gerolsteiner rider could get there ahead of Vinokourov, he could take the 6-second bonus away from him. Really was unbelievable when yesterday's dust all settled to see how close that spot for 5th. And you can see now from this effort how much it matters to be top 5. You know, we wondered about that earlier for Vinokourov, for example.
Every single place on the podium is fought for tooth and nail in the biggest bike race in the world. 2 great riders, Vinokourov and Levi Leipheimer, going for that flat out. Levi doing a good job to find the wheel of the Kazakh rider, but Vinokourov separating Levi from his teammates and then just barely holding on to that tenuous lead. Unbelievable racing in the Tour. Here's the attack by Vino that led to a 2-second bonification.
Well, we thought the sprinters might go after the extra points, but at least in this stage, the sprints became a battle for the extra seconds back after this. Key 7 sweepstakes, and we have had some gorgeous views throughout the Tour. This one's got a little raindrop problem. And we've already seen these sprints matter and matter a lot, except instead of the green jersey points being the matter, they're about extra second bonuses. And we've got one more of those intermediate sprints to come. Just under 40 miles until the final crossing of the finish line on the Champs-Élysées.
Bradley McGee on the attack. Winner of a stage here a couple years ago. Prologue that time, so he got to wear the yellow jersey. Winner of the prologue. During the prologue and stage 1 time trial, they take the time to the hundredths of a second, just in case we have a situation like we have today, where Vino Kurov and Levi Leipheimer will be on the same exact time. They're on the same second. After over 2,000 miles of racing, they will go back, review the hundredths of seconds in stage number 1's time trial, assuming neither one of those two riders get more time at the finish line in the next intermediate sprint, where 6 seconds, 4 seconds, and 2 seconds are up for grabs. They'll go back to stage number 1's time trial.
So many highlights for Lance. Here's what happened yesterday.
With an overall lead of almost 3 minutes, the Stage 20 individual time trial became a personal challenge for Armstrong. Facing his first tour without a stage win, the 34 miles became a metaphor for Armstrong's peerless career. He wasn't racing his rivals, just the ticking hands of the clock and the rolling hills of Saint-Etienne. At the second time split, he led by 19 seconds. Look at the face of Lance Armstrong. This is a man saying, I've never won a stage. Well, watch this. At the third, the lead had grown to 32 seconds. Well,
Phil, just look at Armstrong here. He's sprinting as if he's coming into the finish line. He's only going for the time check. That is absolutely remarkable.
And at the line, the power, the relief and the satisfaction. His final stage win at the Tour de France. His 82nd day in yellow and the promise of just the ride to Paris before he hung up his wheels for good.
Armstrong there is number 4.
And now we have something going on in the peloton. Going around a turn on this very rainy, slick surface, the roads outside of Paris. Right there.
Looked like George Hincapie could be going down. 2 of his teammates right on his wheel. Bradley McGee leading him through that. Lance barely able to stop. He's going to the front. Looks like all of them are all right. Popovich maybe. 3 Discovery guys going down in that very slick corner trying to follow Bradley McGee. It's odd that he would be racing at this point, and now he's getting the wrath of the peloton, taking down 3 of Lance's lieutenants and almost taking down the yellow jersey. That's Popovich. Hincapie now. George is getting back on his bike. And not a very good tactical maneuver by the FDJ rider at the front of the group there. He will win no friends doing that. Let's hope they can get back into the front. This is not a competitive part of the tour. Here's a replay. George leading through. FDJ rider on the front going very fast. George going down on the white stripes. They get very slick when it's raining, especially a light rain like this. And the FDJ rider making it through and now realizes that maybe that wasn't the best tactic. Here's Lance in the yellow jersey, just barely able to slow down with a foot out, tripoding around his teammate's bike and getting going again. Unbelievable. You don't normally have a circumstance like this on the last day of the tour. It's more of a procession, an epilogue, if you will, after so many miles of danger around every corner. To have this crash mar the Discovery team here, there'd be a lot of talking about that. Like, fellas, let's get through the stage. Let's get into Paris, get on the Champs-Élysées. Then we can start racing for the stage win. The last points for the green jersey, maybe the time bonus for 5th place on GC, but we don't need to take out the yellow jersey at this point in the bike race.
So what is it that Bradley McGee did wrong?
You know what I think happened, honestly, is there were some attacks because of the sprint. Vino Kurov went from a long way out. The tempo went from this very slow, very reasonable, piano, as we say, to being a flat-out bike race. When that happens, other riders with ambitions, they decide that it's now their time to try for a stage win. Jose Azevedo talking to Ivan Basso about the foolhardiness of racing a little bit too quickly through these corners. It's dangerous, it's slick, and it's not competitive. So I think that Bradley McGee just got carried away with the attacks that were going, and we saw a number of them. Ronnie Scholes on the attack, came back into the field after that big acceleration, and Lance Armstrong calling to Johan Bernil to make sure his teammates are all right, and we'll see them back in the front. Order has been restored, but a little bit of pandemonium there for a few miles on the tour. Anything can happen in this bike race.
Well, Lance's face went back into poker mode. He might as well have been climbing up plot a day with the look that he just had.
Believe me, Lance was the first man on the scene ready to do something about it. Rain on the Champs-Elysees. If it rains, officials reserve the right to take the time upon the next finish line crossing. The riders still have to complete the 8 laps, but maybe because of that crash that they've just seen, the officials will say, okay, that's it, the GC battle is over. When you get to this line, you guys have to race the stage, but the time, the GC, that competition is over.
How do they tell the entire field about that?
They will announce it over the race radio. That information will go to each team manager in the team car. He will relay it to all of his riders. So the peloton will know almost immediately when that decision is made.
Well, the Tour de France is now in Paris, and for some, the traffic moves on. And for the cyclists in the Tour, the traffic was a little bit dicey. And remember, the cobblestones on the Champs-Elysees can get really slippery. But Lance survived another one.
That's unbelievable.
It's just amazing.
He never ceases to amaze you. The dedication and the competitive nature of the man in yellow. Right there, foot out, whatever it takes to stay in the front. And he even bridged up to Bradley McGee as he was a little bit further down the road. Lance ready to race. That is a street fighting man and the baddest motor scooter in this race.
36.5 miles to go. Lance back to smiling again and back to talking to Ivan Basso at the front of the peloton as they move along the Seine through the center of Paris. At the very beginning, Lance was as easygoing as it gets, signing an autograph, telling us how many, getting handshakes and congratulations from all around, grabbing a teammate's number 7, and getting a handshake from Jan Ullrich as they dueled again, and Lance got the champagne again. Lance locked it up with his convincing, as if he needed to convince anyone anymore, individual time trial yesterday where he gained even more time over all his rivals. He's been near the front of the peloton. He's been shaking hands, toasting champagne, getting thank yous from virtually everyone involved in the race. Competitors, the race cars, even the man on the motorcycle who holds up the distance between the breakaways and the peloton. The cheering has been loud and raucous from the beginning of the stage. And again, it's this ceremonial ride where there are no challenges to the yellow jersey. That's not to say there aren't other things at stake here, like the green jersey and the general classification, including Levi Leipheimer. And we've already seen how much that means as Alexander Vinokourov attacked to gain precious bonus seconds. But now to one of the grand boulevards in all the world, the Champs-Elysees, which is one tough ticket to get to see this, one of the great pictures in sport.
Jose Azevedo, Jaroslav Popovic, George Hincapie, Benjamin Noval, Paolo Savidelli leading Lance Armstrong on to the Champs-Elysees. This is a part of the circuit. They'll come through this tunnel, make a hard left-hand turn, and swing up the Champs-Elysees towards the Arc de Triomphe, past the start-finish line, and there's 8 circuits.
What a great shot.
Complete, beautiful shot there. And when they swing around, it'll just be a few kilometers now. It seems as if they're going at a reasonable tempo. The very slick cobbles are just around the next corner. And at least no attacks yet on the yellow jersey. And we'll see what the jury decides, what the race commissars decide to do about the time. There's Levi. Here's the next sprint for time coming up. He is getting himself near the front as well. Vinokourov is right on Levi Leipheimer's wheel, so Vinokourov, he started all of those accelerations during the first intermediate time sprint. That will be 1K to go when the riders finish their 8 circuits just before the finish line. A lot at stake here. You see just how much it means to these riders, every place on GC in the top 20 of this bike race.
And listen to this.
Al, I have to tell you that last year when Lance was going for his 6th win, the hysteria was insane. But this year, it's the same. And because we're saying goodbye to Lance Armstrong from a competitive sense as they get onto the cobbles, it's been insane plus 100%. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Well, it's Babe Ruth's last game.
It is Babe Ruth.
And we know it before he plays it.
Right, exactly. That's the big difference. And Lance adding drama to his accomplishments by saying months ago that this would be his last bike race today, the 24th of July. 2005, and he is going out in the yellow jersey with his teammates on the front of the peloton.
And now on to the Champs-Élysées from the Place de la Concorde, the Egyptian obelisk. Its peak now paved in gold leaf once again, heading toward the Arc de Triomphe.
You can see the Kazakh Alexander Vinokurov in the light blue jersey. They're just in front of Lance Armstrong on the shoulder of the Discovery riders. He might be itching to try to sprint again for the next time bonus out on the road. We'll have to see if he's going to try to get more time from Levi Leipheimer. You see him there just on the shoulder of Lance Armstrong. Gerald Steiner riders coming to the front along with the Credit Agricole. Ideally, some of the sprinters going for the green jersey will take out the time bonuses by sprinting for the next intermediate sprint, but that's not assured, and they didn't sprint for that at all in the last one, and Alexander Vinokurov got the 2 seconds back. He was behind Levi Leipheimer on. The next sprint, the third lap around this very treacherous circuit today on these cobbled streets of the Champs-Élysées. So,
is there any way you can describe what these cobbles feel like when they're wet like this to ride on?
If in the middle of the night you woke up to get a midnight snack and somebody had put marbles on your linoleum floors as you ran towards the refrigerator to get the remnants of your pizza that you had ordered, watching highlights of the tour, and the lights were off, that's how slick they are.
I just fell down.
Exactly.
And now the rain has picked up a little bit. It's still not rain, really. It's sort of drizzle, but it's definitely coming down as hard as it has all day. At the back of the peloton now, looking up toward the arc.
Riders will pedal. This is a false flat. This is a pretty tough section of road on the cobbles in the rain. Make a U-turn just in front of the arc, come back down, and that's a pretty fast section of road as well. And do the same thing again. U-turn at the bottom of the Champs-Élysées and return 8 times on today's stage. Lance Armstrong there spearheading the peloton as they spread across this wide boulevard and leading the peloton through that corner. He knows how slippery these cobbles can get and doesn't want to do anything in the way of crashing to get in between himself and his 7th Tour de France win. The rain making things very much more treacherous, and no, you cannot assume anything when you're a bike racer. You can't assume that the riders will, all of them will be reasonable and go into town, and you can't assume that you won't get a flat or a crash, even to the very last moment of the tour.
So on the Champs-Élysées, we reflect back on what was voted on by the fans. The Lance 25 culmination is brought to you by BMW, the #1 Lance moment. It came in stage 10 of the 2001 Tour. Lance was chasing down Jan Ullrich and T-Mobile in the mountains. Armstrong faking, not looking good? Absolutely. He made believe he had bad cards in his hand. Then suddenly things changed, and Lance broke away. In the process, looking back at Jan Ullrich, as if to say, are you coming or are you not? Ullrich was not. Lance rode hard, pulled away, and won. And the legacy continued. That was the #1 Lance moment, brought to you by BMW. I think the viewers did a good job.
I think they picked right there. That was the ultimate game of Texas Hold'em. Lance playing poker, faking he was hurting the whole stage. T-Mobile Telecom in those days went to the front, put the hammer down, but Lance had the last lap, gaining big time on Jan Ullrich all the way up to the top of Alpe d'Huez, and Lance won the stage at the end of the day and won the Tour a couple of weeks later.
And how about this? It looks as though maybe the sun has decided to shine after all on what's happening on the Champs-Élysées. It peeks out now on these slick, wet roads in central Paris. The spectacle of cycling in its grandest form. On the Champs-Élysées, it's enough to give you chills as it pounds by. Lance soon to say goodbye. Once again, one great athlete to another.
First of all, as a sports fan, and I watch every sport in the world, I don't want to see people who are still successful and who are still winning and still good. I don't want to see them retire. As a professional athlete who did retire, only you know on the inside when it's time to retire. So I always said that the greatest time to retire for a professional athlete is when the public says he could have went another year. That's when you know you've retired at the right time.
And as we continue to watch these images from stage 21, we have to say thank you to our crew. They come from all over the world, 10 countries overall. Not only do they have to be great and talented at what they do, but they have to be good people. You survive 23 days of 4,000, 5,000 kilometers in keeping up with this race. You can't have any knuckleheads, and we don't. We've got some great people on our crew.
It's a knucklehead-free zone at the OLN production crew. It's great to work with all the people involved. I want to say thank you personally for myself.
Absolutely. Very proud to be part of our presentation of the Tour de France. We're getting word from the tour organizers that because of the slick conditions, there will be no more sprint bonuses awarded. This Tour de France is now officially over, and it ended with the first passage of the finish line. Lance Armstrong has officially won this Tour de France. They will pedal out the miles and the laps remaining, but it is over. There is no more racing. We'll wait for the official standings, but Lance Armstrong is the champion of the 2005 Tour de France.
Stage win still up for grabs. Also, the points will be awarded throughout the stage. And not this passage, but the next one is the next intermediate sprint. We'll see if Stuart O'Grady comes out. There's Thor Hushovd way up at the front in the green jersey with the green helmet on the wheel of Lance Armstrong in the yellow jersey. And the stage win, of course, still up for grabs at the end of the stage. And all of these laps around the Champs-Élysées up to the Arc de Triomphe and back down and around. 27.7 miles to go.
There are thousands and thousands of people lining the Champs-Élysées underneath those trees.
Carlos de Cruz, it looks like, from the FDJ. Next rider off on the attack, Phonak covering. One of the Fossa Bortolo riders. This stage has just come to full life, and the attacks have begun. And I think that these are going to last throughout the stage. We've had a lot of field sprints here, but we have had, once in a while, successful breakaways on this last stage of the Tour.
And it looks like the rain has stopped. Frankie Vogler had his tongue hanging out there saying, this pace is hard. Thomas Vogler. Boy, are they being careful.
Absolutely. The road's still very slick, so there's Robbie McEwen just coming into your picture. One gets the feeling that it's a good decision by the race jury. Nicolas Jalabert on the attack. That the GC battle called off because of very sketchy conditions. I'd hate to see something dramatically horrible happen to any of our riders in the Tour general classification. So that battle is in the history books now, and we'll see who winds up in 5th and 6th place between Vinokourov and Levi Leipheimer. Vinokourov and Levi tied exactly the same amount of time, 11 minutes 21 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. After 2,200 plus miles of racing, that's unbelievable that there isn't even 1 second of separation between the two riders.
9 men have pulled away from the peloton. No organized attack yet as you look at the back of the main pack.
Phonak, Nicolas Jalabert, Salvatore Comesso, it looks like. Bouygues Telecom, looks like Thomas Vogler. Juan Antonio Fletcher, Cedric Vasseur. Couple of Domina Vacante riders. Almost no results for that team in the race so far. We haven't even mentioned their name hardly. And they have found the move just at the front of the peloton. There's going to be some very aggressive racing the rest of this stage.
We have seen absolute vicious commitment to winning a stage and talked about the prestige that comes with that. But to stand on the podium as the stage winner in Paris, and here comes Vinokourov.
Vinokourov again going out on the attack. Might not have gotten the directive that there's no time bonuses left in the bike race, and the GC standings will stay as they are, assuming you finish the full 8 laps of the circuit. Luis Sanchez there, Liberty Seguros rider on the front. Back together now, but look at the long line of riders on the back. There is I want to say a couple of riders have gone down now in that last corner from the breakaway. So the breakaway going through there way too fast. 3 or 4 riders down. Now we're left with just 4 men in the front. Vogler, Jalabert, Vasseur, and the Domina Vacante rider. So,
hey, Thomas Vogler could almost salvage his tour here.
Oh my gosh, if he won a stage, it would be the biggest thing to happen since Montcoutier's stage on Bastille Day a couple of weeks ago. The crash definitely separated the group. The cameraman having trouble keeping up with all of the different changes. There's the peloton still chasing. Right, this is exactly what happened on the cobbles. The breakaway got onto that. Wegman going down to Gerolsteiner rider, FDJ. These were riders in the break. Carlos de Cruz, the FDJ rider, and they have gotten onto that corner on the cobbles and went down from the break. That's a very tough circumstance. They're going to have a long catch because the peloton racing flat out right now. It'll be a long time before these riders catch back up to the front.
Furious at someone or something, or just frustrated?
Here's a replay of the crash. Trying to negotiate that bend. This is why the GC battle has been called off for the rest of the stage of the tour. The riders were getting up. Now watch the peloton go through these guys. And that is an incredibly sketchy situation. One false move, and you're going to go down again. We're going to have to see how it all plays out, but a bit of chaos because of the rain on today's stage in the tour, the very last stage.
And guess who got through unscathed?
The yellow jersey. It's almost like a miracle, time in and time out. 7 years now this has been going on for Lance Armstrong. All of the chaos out on the road, he seems to have a special gift at getting through it in every situation as it presents itself. And you got to admit, though, he's the most dynamic, the most well-balanced, the most technically advanced rider in this bike race. He has great skills, bike handling, and that doesn't even begin to say what kind of power he has on the climbs and what kind of tenacity he brings to the time trials. And we see a man completely ready for every single race situation as it comes to him, and Lance Armstrong now stands on 7 tour wins because of that.
A little breakup in the front, Grivko falling back. We still have 25 miles to go.
Liquigas rider. Sometimes when a stage is so slow as it was today, the riders, this is Michele Albacini, the Liquigas rider from Switzerland. And when the stage is early on is as slow as this one was, the riders have more energy towards the end, and the attacks and accelerations are incredibly vicious. Laurent Brochard, Cedric Vasseur, Nicolas Jalabert and Luis Sanchez in line there chasing Albacini as he goes across the line. 39 kilometers to the finish, 6 laps to go. There's Vasseur, the chase group with Grochard and Salvatore Comesso, the Lamprey rider, as well as Luis Sanchez. The peloton just on their heels, just coming into the picture now.
Everything was free and easy. There were crashes. Lance Armstrong and Discovery survived those, but it's as if the Tour de France hit the streets of Paris and someone flipped on a switch of competition, and the race is on. Albacini has pulled out from the peloton and leads, but it looks as though they are forming an attack to bring him in.
Albacini, the Swiss rider on the Italian Liquigas squad, racing on the Bianchi bicycles. The last man surviving from the breakaway. They came to grief on this downhill cobbled corner. Half of the riders in the break fell down. Kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the breakaway, when suddenly from 8 you have 4. 3 have fallen back, and Albacini the only man carrying on, but the peloton hot on his heels. He's making a huge effort and not getting very far, so I'm sure he'll be caught before very much longer. Lamprey still on the front, and there goes the peloton. Lance Armstrong can go to the back now and just watch the proceedings. The GC battle is over. Lance has won the Tour, assuming he can finish these 8 circuits, which he should have no trouble doing.
Around the Place de la Concorde, down into the tunnel for another lap.
$35 Ks to the finish. Seen just about everything from this stage, as we have from all the stages. Each stage a microcosm of the race a microcosm of cycling in general, and about the most perfect allegory between sports and real life, unfolding and a soap opera of human proportions. The Tour throws everything it can at the racers, and the man most capable of handling all those situations comes out on top. And for the last 7 years, it's been Lance Armstrong. Somewhere in that melee, Discovery has gone off the front. They've seen how treacherous it is. It's only a stage win that's up for grabs, and the points for the green jersey. So they have vanished from the front, and they will ride a defensive race all the way to the line as the rest of these athletes fight out for the stage win.
Big announcement for OLN today. For 150 years, it's one of the most prestigious races in the world. Now the 32nd America's Cup will be on OLN. The United States captain, Chris Dixon, leads the BMW Oracle racing team through the rough Mediterranean waters with hopes of outrunning the defender, Switzerland's Team Alinghi. Can he bring the America's Cup home? There will be no second place. The quest for those 32nd America's Cup is coming in June 2007. That's the announcement today for OLN. And now the probes continue to see who can somehow pull away from the peloton and get away from its aerodynamic advantage, if that's possible. The streets may be drying now. That could help out a break.
Yes, the street's starting to dry out now. A little bit less treacherous. Saunier Duval, Liquigas, Servais Canavan of the Quick Step team now on the breakaway. Coming around, 5 laps to go, and they get up to the start-finish line in a couple hundred meters. You couldn't have a better backdrop for Lance Armstrong's accomplishment than this part of the city of Paris. Tour de France, the most demanding athletic challenge in the whole world. And I think without it, it would be tough to imagine an athlete like Lance Armstrong having something to put his stamp of authority on.
That's up close on the cobblestones. Give you a sense of what the bumps feel like.
Et maintenant, donc, de 20 secondes, il est emmené par Mario Arx, avec juste derrière lui, Rodney Maggie, lequel, en 2003...
We'll take a break on OLN, and we'll do so with the Subway Tour Trivia for Stage 21. Our last question. There have been 19 multiple winners of the Tour, but who was the first rider to successfully defend his title? Was it A, Lucien Petit-Breton, B, Eddie Merckx, C, Louison Bobet, or D, Jacques Anquetil? The answer when we come back. The first rider to successfully defend his title? Go way back to Lucien Petit-Breton. The 1907 winner came back prepared in 1908 to win his second title and became the first back-to-back winner. We're back at full speed on the Champs-Élysées. 5 laps to go, and it has been hectic to say the least, and it seems as though everybody got ramped up, as you might expect, when the Tour hit the Champs-Élysées, but now even more so with the conditions getting better.
Conditions improving, a little sunshine coming out to bathe these racers in some gold from heaven as they make their final few laps along the Champs-Élysées here. Here's the breakaway. Pretty solid group of riders off the front. We saw moments ago in the peloton a chase being organized by the Lotto squad of Robbie McEwen. My pick to win the stage.
We've got Servais Knaven, Manuel Quinziato, and Kjell Karlström. The teams are Quick Step, Sonia Duval, and Lyckogas. 3 away. It is absolutely staggering, the amount of people here. The Texas flags, the sevens, the yellow jerseys, the American flags, overflowing on the Champs-Élysées and everywhere you can look in Paris.
Peloton in the background there, the breakaway in the foreground. Peloton you can see being led by the red shoulder jerseys of the Lotto team. If they can keep it together, they know they have the fastest man left in the bike race in Robbie McEwen. So prestigious to win any stage of the Tour. Robbie's won 3 already and would love to add 1 to his palmares here. This is the sprinter's paradise, generally speaking, when all of the world's attention is on bike racing. There's Cadel Evans himself in the top 10 on GC, leading the Lotto squad, chasing down this breakaway of about 10 riders now.
Just about 17 miles to go.
There's the Discovery team. There's Lance Armstrong staying out of trouble. The GC battle is over for this Tour, and it's just up for the stage win and the green points, green jersey points, as they make this very treacherous circuit.
Lance Armstrong is the yellow jersey wearer. He's going to win this 2005 Tour de France. When we come back, Phil and Paul have the call. We'll see who wins the stage and gets the green jersey. One more time, one great athlete to another.
He's a symbol. I mean, he is a iconic, positive symbol of, you know, I've been lucky enough to have been born in that generation to be able to see something like that. You hear of other people in previous generations that, you know, have seen the Alis of the world, Arthur Ashe, transform stuff. I wasn't around where I could really get a true sense of that. I have a true sense of what Lance has meant to people, especially young kids who have cancer, who have a debilitating disease. You know, Lance is iconic.
Well, I think that was Bram Tankink who just took a flyer off the front. The big tall man there from Quick Step. We'll see when we get down there as he snakes away. He's got Sonia Duval for company. This is the team of Chris Horner. This is Chris Horner. And I'll tell you what, this man in his first Tour de France finishes in 33rd overall, has had a wonderful race.
Well, 33rd overall is not what's important for Chris Horner in this year's Tour de France. It's the fact, Phil, that he's been on the attack on a number of occasions. He actually was rather unfortunate. On one of the mountain stages, he lost himself 42 minutes. Now, if you take that off the time of Chris Horner, he'd be well up in the top 20 and not bad for your first participation in the Tour.
Not bad at all. He almost won a stage too, wiped out in sight of the finishing line by Robin McEwen, heading home the sprinters. This is Tankink now and Chris Horner. And still Française de Jeu are leading the chase behind, which indicates to us that Baden Cook, their sprinter, who's had a pretty poor tour, is now looking for a win here in Paris.
Well, I tell you what, it's also important for Française de Jeu because Bernard Eisel has got pretty good form too, and he's another one of their sprinters who's got himself over the mountains and survived until this final showdown on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Armstrong just going through there at the back. He's not worried at all about time anymore. All he wants to do is tick off the kilometers and get this race over and done with.
Out of the tunnel. They always have to wait for them. Television cameras don't work in tunnels. They haven't got round to that technology yet. And here come the riders onto the Rue de Rivoli again as we course our way towards what will be the start of lap number 5 of 8.
Looking down there, you can see there's a long line of riders stretched out because of the acceleration. That sign there, 1 kilometer is 1 kilometer to the finishing line, but we haven't quite got to that situation yet. Chris Horner is doing a fabulous job here. This man came to Europe a number of years ago and rode for the Française de Jeu team. He turned professional in 1995. Rode for Française de Jeu for 3 seasons. He was very successful. Then he switched across to the Mercury squad, but then became very much an American-based rider until finally, at the end of last season, he was brought on to Sonet-Duval and only given the chance of riding the Tour de France about 10 days before when he won a stage of the Tour of Switzerland.
It just shows you sometimes the team managers don't know which riders are on form, because certainly Chris Horner should have been in at the first time of asking, I think. He's shown that certainly over this last 3 weeks. Just looking into the face of the peloton, everybody busy now, getting on with work in hand here. You get some idea down there of just what it's like in the Champs-Élysées. This 5-laned highway each side, 10 lanes, normally jam-packed and nobody moving. But when they get rid of the cars, these boys show them how it should be transposed.
How fresh this man, Chris Horner, is coming out of the Tour de France there. He has got the form and the ability still to go out on the attack. And I hope he's got the ability to come back and race again next year, because having tasted the Tour de France for the first time, I don't think he'll ever want to stay away again.
Well, the way he came round that corner, the roads have definitely dried out, Paul, because he leaned his bike right over there and he's got legs. These boys are having to back off or take him on, because Robbie McEwen seems to have stopped his team chasing just now. May not be a wise move.
Well, McEwen sitting around about 70th place there. The man who's paying the most attention at the front end of this group is the green jersey, Thor Hushovd. He'll be looking for the victory if he can here this afternoon, but these two riders are looking very good. The man at the front, Bram Tankink, is not a prolific winner in the sport of this of cycling, but he is a very rapid rider. He's looked a lot after riders like Tom Boonen in the sprint. He's a long way down. They're both a long way down, more than an hour behind Lance Armstrong in the overall classification. The strongest man of the two is definitely Horner.
He is, and he's driving on here, Chris. And, you know, he's going to go back home to the United States and start racing there as a big-time finisher in the Tour de France. 33rd overall. That's the position he will finish today. Salvatore Camesso here, sitting in the tail of this leading group. There is Lance Armstrong, 7-time winner of the Tour de France, and with the rookie just behind him in the white jersey, Jaroslav Popovic.
Well, Armstrong first overall after yesterday's stage, and basically right now he is the winner of the Tour de France, but he's got to get through the next 16.9 kilometers. They're whipping up the pace. In fact, it's Stuart O'Grady's team Cofidis doing the majority of the work, and Robbie McEwen sitting quite a long way back.
I think Robbie might feel he can't win the green jersey, so he's waiting to see what happens here. We're looking at Bram Tankink. He's never won a race in his life, Bram. He's been a pro since the year 2001. But he is a workhorse, and well, we've had a few first-timers win races this last 3 weeks on the Tour de France.
Well, you know, riders like this from the flatlands of the north, and he's actually from Holland, know very well what it's like riding fast on flat races, and this is the kind of course that would suit him to absolute perfection. But I think here you get an idea of just how fast we are going, and Robbie McEwen probably said to the boys, it's okay, don't worry. I might be sitting a little bit far back in the main field, but just pull those guys back for me.
16 miles to go. Two teams of Australian leadership, which is De Vigeman-Lotti with McEwen, the Cofidis team with O'Grady. They're both hunting that green jersey. It's not eluded Robbie. He's won it twice. It's always eluded Stuart O'Grady. And if he wins the stage, it will all depend on where Thor Hushovd who's wearing the green jersey, finishes.
9.8 miles to go to the finish, inside of 16 kilometers as we stretch out along the Place de la Concorde one more time. The Golden Dome you can see in the back there, by the way, is Les Invalides, and that is where Napoleon Bonaparte was actually laid to rest.
They're still away. The camera often foreshortens the lens. The time gap is still there. The pack are massing now to see who else is going to make any pace-making here, because it looks as though Cofidis and De Vito and Lotto have turned off the chase just for the moment. Those are the riders right on the front here. 10 kilometers to go, 8 seconds, the latest time check, as they now race into the final 6 miles of this year's Tour de France, and the sun is breaking through, the roads are dry, the sprinters can start sharpening those legs. There's the breakaway. They can lasso them now as and when they like. Here comes the teammates of the sprinters, the teammates of Stuart O'Grady and Baden Cook, and now Alan Davis has sent his team up as well, another Australian sprinter.
It's almost over, Phil. Unofficially, I make it 4 seconds, and there's the proof. It's not very much at all there as we look over our shoulders. These guys know now that the main field has got this very much under control as they come onto the Place de la Concorde again. Next time they come up to the Champs-Élysées and the finishing line, they will hear the bell indicating 1 lap to go, 6.5 kilometers.
And the end of the Tour de France and the end of Lance Armstrong's career. The field now on dry roads where they were slipping and sliding just 4 laps ago. They're in 9 kilometers to the finish now. Française de Jeu, and they must be feeling pretty confident. This is Carlos de Cruz. He's known every angle of the Tour de France today.
Well, he's had the ups and downs, hasn't he? But right now he has to turn it around completely because they've got 2 very good sprinters. The move here now coming again. Everyone will attack. This is CSC launching a move.
This is the battle of the sprinters now. They are coming around through the tunnel. Then it'll round for the bell for the last lap. They haven't caught the 2 leaders yet, but they must be right on their back wheels.
Yeah, it's all back together. You see now CSC are wondering whether or not they can turn it around. You know, a man who has been a great sprinter throughout his career is Giovanni Lombardi. There isn't a sprinter on Team CSC. Maybe today he's going to get his chance.
Well, that would be a huge surprise, but he can pack at this stage of the race with some big sprinters out. It could go in a very strange direction today. All the field is together. We think 155. 1 or 2 have been riding around the back of the race with flat tyres. There have been no punctures since the rain stopped. As Française de Jeu, 2 sprinters on the block. Baden Cook and Bernard Eisel could be looking to help each other to a stage victory here.
Well, I think they've settled their differences in the last couple of weeks, and they do realise and they will talk together to see who is the man who's got the best sprint at the end of the day, and that's, I think, how they will try and sort it out for themselves. But you can now see that that is a very angry main field, stretched out into one long big line as the pressure and the pace kicks up as they come under that banner. Next time they come under that banner, there'll be a red kite in the middle, the last 1,000 meters of this year's Tour.
And they won't be riding like this. They'll be all over the road racing for the final stage. Lance Armstrong can enjoy this. He's on his lap of honour on the Champs-Élysées, the winner of the Tour de France. His team are all around him, making sure nobody knocks him off. He doesn't fall off. They're always with him, as they have been for 3 weeks of the Tour. There's the big cavalry charge now, past the hotel where Lance will be staying tonight when he gets there, just off to our left. And now onto the Champs-Élysées, and there's the Lone Star flag. The wind has got up, and that's why the rain has gone away.
Fluttering a little bit in the distance, as probably because of the speed of the main field as they whip by. There they are lining up now for the final circuit here of the Champs-Élysées. Lotto de Vitamont very much in control at the front end of the main field, and just a quick glimpse there of Robbie McEwen. Whipping up the pace here, this is Wim van Sevenden. Behind him is, you can see Mario Aerts a little bit further back. That is the bell.
The last circuit of the Tour de France here on the Champs-Élysées. The bell rings, 6.5 kilometers to go, and everybody is scrabbling for wheels here, and Armstrong is just watching it all from the back seats.
At the back seat, he's taking a back seat, doesn't want to go down in the last circuit. Cheryl Crow. There is one of the twins, Grace or Isabel. They're identical twins, so it's difficult to tell which one is which. But on the front end of the main field, it's still Lotto de Vitamont, Cofidis, and Gerolstein are throwing a little bit into the mix as well.
Little bit of a ricochet in the centre of the bunch there. Some riders dodging around a bit as they fight for the front. I can see Matt White trying to force through. You can bet your life he'll have Stuart O'Grady on his back wheel. Life at the back now. A little bit painful here.
A little bit painful, but the pain will all be over in around about 7.5 minutes time. Wim van Zevenant from Lotto has swung
Matt
away.
White, I think.
Looks like it could be Cedric Vasseur moving across the frontier. Matty White, I think, will be looking much more after Stuart O'Grady. It is Vasseur looking to get a little bit of final glory for France.
Cedric Vasseur, Dad Allen was once a rider in the Tour de France. Cedric's won a stage before. This is a move, I think, to try and draw the stings of the sprinters of Cofidis, of De Vitamont Lotto and Tor Hushov's Credit Agricole, because this will deflect the attention from O'Grady.
It is so difficult to ride off the front of the main field on the final lap on the Champs-Elysees, because the main field, Phil, when they tip around the hairpin bend at the top, will go down the other side at 60 kilometers an hour. But everybody here seems to want to have a go.
Well, I can't believe this guy here. I don't know who it is at the moment, but he's just blown Cedric Vasseur back into the peloton from Sonia Duval. It looks like the style of Rubens Battagliati, who was the man who snatched the yellow jersey a few years ago in Luxembourg on day one. He's gone clear of the field with and that looked like his sprinting style.
And looked like Jorg Yats coming across, but the man who leads them round the hairpin bend at the top was your mate Matty White. He's trying to set something up for Stuart O'Grady here on the final day. O'Grady needs to do something very special, but still nowhere to be seen in the first 15 or 20 places. Robbie McEwen, but you will see him when we come down to the last 200 meters.
Oh, we've got two riders here now. Battagliati has been joined. It could be Fabian Cancellara, who's hooked up there, and Jorg Yatsk is coming across the gap now. These boys racing for the win. The Tour de France is ended for the race on time. The Maillot Jaune for winners is waiting for Lance Armstrong because of the rain earlier. This is just for the stage win now, but that's just the same in these boys' record books.
It is glory to win on the Champs-Elysees, 4.5 kilometers, but look at the main field. They have pounced on everything that's got off the front of the main field and brought them right back into the fold. Number one, and number one is at the end of today go to read number 7, because Armstrong is just making the last 4.5 kilometers of his great ride around here in France, making it win number 7.
The peloton now for the last time turning on the style here as the Fassa Bortolo rider is coming through, and I thought he looked like Cancellara. He's a big man. He's got Jorg Yatsk on his back wheel. They've dropped the other rider. There's the main field out front.
Well,
they're saying
been
Juan
back
Antonio Fletcher on the computer. I thought he looked a bit big for him, but it doesn't matter anyway, because they're all over the top and we're all together. And 3.5 kilometers to go.
And now the chaos of the last 3 kilometers. There's going to be a lot of movement up at the front end of the main field. Riders will take incredible risks here, Phil, to make sure they get themselves into the right place for the final corner.
Now the Lotto boys of Robbie McEwen, who has won twice here. Laurent Brochard doesn't want to sprint. The ex-World Road Race champion with who else? Alexander Vinokourov. This is more like a horse race on opposite sides of the rails.
This is unbelievable. They're throwing complete and utter caution to the wind. Alexander Vinokourov is a great battler. I think if they had to pick the most aggressive rider, it must have been very difficult between Oscar Pereiro and Alexander Vinokourov. They've stretched out the race into a long line once more. This is the last time they'll go round the Place de la Concorde, and now you can see the sprinters starting to move up to set themselves up for what they hope will be a winning position.
Well, I hope they can get themselves into a position here, because look at Alexander Vinokourov now again pulling a face here and going for gold. He may not know there's no bonuses here. He might think he's racing for 5th place in the Tour de France, but they've been cancelled. He's got up to the leaders now. The sprinters are trying to organise at the back.
Well, Engi's trying to organise himself here for the win of the stage, but looking back, you can see they've got a slight advantage. Panic on board in the streets of the sprinters, because absolutely this is a good move by Alexander Vinokourov.
Look at his strength. He's trying to hold off the whole field here, and we saw him do it earlier on today. We've got another rider there from AG2R, but I'm not too sure. It doesn't look like Simon Gerrans. A bit too big for Simon. as we've got 2 kilometers to go. They are still clear going into the tunnel.
Hushoff up into about 5th or 6th
position,
place.
Hushoff.
He's looking good. I still couldn't see Robbie McEwen. He's such a hard man to spot, and then all of a sudden he always pops up right at the very end.
Well, they're queuing up for the tunnel now, but it's the riders in the top 20 who come out the other end. He'll be fighting out for the win. There's 3 of them now. Looks like it might be McGee who's reached them here. 3 riders going around the bend onto the Rue de Rivoli. 1 mile to go, less now, as we'll shortly see the kilometre over the head. There'll be a red kite attached to that now.
Well, that's a good gap that they've got, and all you need is a little bit of chaos to come from the sprinters, and
They
you've
could
got
do
the gap.
this. They could beat the sprinters at their own game. There's somebody dived over to the left of the picture. Francaise de Jeu has gone clear. As 1 kilometre to go to the finish now. He's sprinting with the power of Brad McGee, but I don't think it is Brad McGee. Just need to see his face a little bit. It is big grips here, and Vinokourov is on his wheel. And this is McGee, I think, going for it.
Well, they're all over the road, and the sprinters, I think, Phil, have been foxed and cheated. They're inside the kilometre. Vinokourov is right on the wheel there. They're onto the Place de la Concorde now, ducking and diving. Do not play the tactical game now, because when you get a gap like this on the sprinters, you've got to throw caution to the wind.
As we turn onto the finishing straight, it's never been seen for a few years. McGee taking on Vinokourov, and somebody trying to reach here. But that is a brilliant Brad McGee, who's had such a poor tour. He's now trying to finish it off with flying colours. He's going to have to dig deep, because right behind him is Alexander Vinokourov, and I think Cancellara trying to reach them as well. Alexander Vinokourov, on many occasions, the man of the Tour de France, is getting his 2nd stage victory, as Brad McGee will take 2nd for Australia. That is an incredible win for Alexander Vinokourov.
And behind, it actually blows away the race for the green jersey. I just saw Thor Hushoff come across the line ahead of Robbie McEwen, but where is the yellow jersey? He must be there somewhere. I've just seen him. He's gone across right to the back. There he is.
Happy to freewheel home. History in the making. 7 times a winner of the Tour de France. He now retires. This man is going to rue the day they cancel the bonuses today. Because of that, he would not finish in 5th place in the Tour de France.
You know what, though? I think he would swap 5th or 6th place for a victory on the Champs-Élysées, because this is one of the most magical places in the world as a professional cyclist to win a race.
I've never seen a rider power off the front of the peloton on the Champs-Élysées like that. Incredible strength to rip off the front and hold them at bay at 50 kilometres an hour. But that is the man down there. The story is about Lance Armstrong. We'll never see him race again unless he comes out for fun in some obscure little town somewhere in the United States. This man now is turning his back on the Tour de France. 7 times a winner in the last 7 years, as he now gets ready for, first of all, the compulsory drugs test, and then we will see him. Congratulations from everybody all around. All right, well, the Eiffel Tower's seen many things, but it's never seen a 7-time winner of the Tour de France before. And Alexander Vinokourov beat the sprinters. There's Lance. Congratulations from George. Let's take a break. Rejoin for all the presentations and interviews.
Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen back from the finish line. Alexander Vinokourov, talk about a free agent playing for the future, wins his 2nd stage of the Tour and gets a time bonus that changes the general classification, but he was aggressive in this Tour.
Well, you know what, Al, we said at the start of the Tour de France, this man is a master tactician. Lance Armstrong knew how clever this bike rider was. Strength for strength. Vinokourov is not as powerful as a man like Lance Armstrong, but he knows the moment in a race when to take up the lead.
Walter Godefroy presenting him the prize there. He won the race here in 1975, first time on the Champs-Élysées, and now he manages Vinokourov. Said he was no good early in the week.
So as he enjoys handshakes all around, Pacific Life takes us a look at the stage results, and I guess you just have to say he caught the sprinters at exactly the right time.
He attacked with just a few Ks to go. He was joined by Bradley McGee, playing the spoilers role for Robbie McEwen and Stuart O'Grady. McGee working with Vinokourov, but Vinokourov the stronger. Thor Hushoff in 7th on the stage, conserves the green jersey.
Meanwhile, Lance Armstrong spent many of the final laps at the back of the peloton. It looks as though he wanted to have a great view if anything bad happened on what were slippery cobblestones until the conditions dramatically improved. That's it. It was actually official way back before the laps began because of the bad conditions on the cobblestones. Here is the general classification, the final results for the yellow jersey. Without question, it was Armstrong, Basso, Ulrich, and everybody else.
Yeah, I feel a little bit sorry, of course, for Alexander Vinokurov, not for Alexander, but for the fact he displaced Leipheimer. But it's always been a battle of seconds for the midfield. They had a chance to sort it in the time trial yesterday. It didn't happen, so Leipheimer takes 6th at the very last sprint of the Tour. Michael Rasmussen goes down from 3rd to a final finish in 7th. Cadel Evans is the big Australian hope, best finish for 20 years for Australia. Christophe Moreau there, he was the best Frenchman, and he's not sure he's even got a contract with his team next year.
What about the 14th place for George Hincapie, 23.40 back, but Lance Armstrong believes Hincapie could come back and win the Tour. In his personal battle, he got ahead of Bobby Julich, who finished in 17th with a great performance, probably his best since 1998.
And if Vinokurov hadn't attacked and the charge to the line was left to the sprinters, who knows what might have happened. Bottom line, Thor Hushovd, the first Norwegian to wear the green jersey, now wears it on the Champs-Elysees.
I'll tell you, Al, this has been a great Tour. I don't want to criticise the French that gave us this great race, but where are they on the podium? 2 Scandinavians sharing 2 top awards, Hushovd for Norway in green, and now Rasmussen for Denmark, King of the Mountains. He had an up and a down Tour. Very embarrassing for him yesterday, falling off twice in the time trial, but this young man deserves what he gets out of it too.
Bob, is this the future of Team Discovery, Jaroslav Popovic?
Absolutely. This man, winner of the white jersey as best young rider for this year's Tour. That's the only competition on time besides the yellow jersey. And this is a man in the service of Lance Armstrong throughout the Tour, able to still get up there on GC. Watch for him to ascend the ladder and eventually get on the overall podium for the yellow jersey.
And now the 3 that sat atop the general classification. Lance Armstrong, Jan Ulrich, and Ivan Basso with his child. The one thing that comes out here is the oozing of respect between the 3.
Absolutely. They've been done battle in some of the roughest roads in the world. They've gone head-to-head. Basso really did try against Armstrong, and so too did Jan Ulrich. Now they're on the podium as friends and great rivals. You know, Jan Ulrich would have won the Tour probably 5 times without Armstrong.
I think what was amazing was the stage up to the summit in Mons by the aerodrome, because I got the feeling there that Lance Armstrong actually wanted to choose the guys who were going to be 2nd and 3rd on the podium up alongside him.
And now Lance Armstrong proudly stands on the Champs-Elysees, and for the 7th consecutive year, the national anthem of the United States will be played here. The sun is shining gloriously in an event where it took a long time for an American to even think that the national anthem of the United States could be played at the Tour de France. But here it is.
États-Unis d'Amérique, vainqueur d'un 7e Tour de France. Et mesdames, messieurs, votre attention, nous voyons Bernard Hinault qui tend un micro à Lance Armstrong, qui va maintenant vous adresser quelques mots.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to say it in English because my French is obviously not good enough. But first thing I'd like to say is, for me to end a career with this podium is really a dream podium. This is a guy that has challenged me and our team in the race. But I'm gonna get the Basso. Just hang on. But he's challenged us on all levels for a long time, and he's a special rival and a special person. Ivan is I don't know. It's tough to race with Ivan. He's too good of a friend, and he's perhaps the future of the Tour de France. So Ivan, you know, this next year, maybe this is your step, or Jan, maybe this is your step. I'm out of it, so it's up to you guys. But I couldn't have done this without an excellent team, without an excellent sponsor in the Discovery Channel. We have absolutely the best program in the world, the best trainers, the best soigneurs, the best mechanics, and I owe them everything. A lot of great people and a lot of great years that have gone into this. And finally, the last thing I'll say for the people that don't believe in cycling, the cynics and the skeptics, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry you can't dream big, and I'm sorry you don't believe in miracles. But this is one hell of a race. This is a great sporting event, and you should stand around and believe. You should believe in these athletes, and you should believe in these people. And I'm a fan of the Tour de France for as long as I live, and there are no secrets. This is a hard sporting event, and hard work wins it. So, vive le Tour, forever. Thank you.
Well, the cynics may never have showed up, but there were days in this tour, especially in the mountains, where it felt like everybody else in the world did. And as we continue to wrap things up, and behind me over my shoulder, this long journey, you look back on a day like this, did we really do that? Yeah, we did. And for someone like Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwen, and Bob Roll, it's decades of talking about and completing tracks like this. Okay, put Lance in place, because, you know, you guys are always about history with Anquetil and Merckx and Bernardino. So where does he go?
Well, I can't believe that next year I probably won't mention his name more than once a broadcast, because, you know, life's going to be very different without Lance Armstrong. I'm glad he hit out at his critics in his speech, because, you know, there are still a lot of people in the world believe what he's doing on good health, good preparation and good food is physically impossible, because his story is quite unbelievable. And I believe Lance, and I've spent a time with him. I love him. I think he's a fantastic athlete, and I hope he turns up into politics too, because he'd be good at that.
He'd be a very good politician. I think what is impressive is the fact that, you know, you have to catch him. I always think back to 1996 when I met Lance Armstrong in the University Hospital of Indianapolis, and I looked at him walking down the corridor pushing the Baxter with a drip in his arm, and I thought that was the last time I was going to see that guy.
Yeah.
And he comes back not just to live, not just to ride a bicycle, but to win the Tour, and then to win it 7 times. He has become the greatest Tour de France rider of all time. It's sad to close a book, but I don't think the Armstrong book is completely closed.
It's never sad to close it when you've enjoyed the story.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be another volume.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and you know there's going to be another chapter.
I have to agree with that. I think that Lance's real life begins right now that his athletic career is over. He's got some time to reflect. I'm sure he'll spend most of that time with his family. But I can't wait to see the next chapter in Lance Armstrong's life. We've kind of been swept away by his athletic accomplishments over the years, and we've forgotten that he's a cancer survivor. And that's what will resound with the people, is his story battling our most inexplicable disease and one of the most debilitating things in our lives. And more power to Lance Armstrong as he goes forward with his real life.
Well, let's get it in Lance Armstrong's own words. His conversation now with Craig Hummer.
Lance, some of the greatest athletes of all time, like Tiger Woods and Wayne Gretzky, have said they marvel at you and what you've been able to do. How do you see yourself and what you've accomplished?
Well, you know, I also have my heroes, and those, it's odd you mention those names, guys like Tiger, guys like Gretzky, guys like Jordan, guys like Agassi. Those are the guys that you look up to, guys that have been at the top of their game for a long time. Even Tiger, who's young, he's been there for a long time. And I really looked also to a guy like Gretzky, who I think has handled retirement incredibly well. He's moved into more of an ownership role and a managerial role, and he's just a class guy. So
Johan Brunel has said that he thinks your legacy is that you've trained and that you've set a new standard for training and that it's going to change cycling forever. Have you thought about what you want your legacy to be and how you want to be remembered?
No, I get asked that a lot, but I firmly believe that an individual cannot write or create his own. I mean, perhaps he can create it by his actions, but I can't be in charge of dictating what it says or how you're remembered. So, you know, in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll see what the legacy is. But I think we did come along and revolutionize the cycling part, the training part, the equipment part, and You know, we're fanatics. We're fanatically obsessed with cycling.
Speaking of years, it's been almost 10 years since your cancer diagnosis. What would you highlight or say was the most important thing, or how you came back, not just from your illness, but reached the pinnacle of sport?
No, I mean, at that point, everything changed for me. I mean, the way I approached the sport, the diet, the recovery, that was a watershed event for me.
All right, well, you just walked off the podium for the last time. Congratulations.
One must acknowledge the achievements of a champion, and so must we acknowledge the achievements of the man who selected better than anyone else through the course of 23 days. It is time now for the final presentation in 2005 of the OLN yellow jersey. Bob, can you please do the honors? Phil, your thoughts?
Well, I humbly accept, and
My thoughts.
I think Phil was a little bit upset because
No, I
he
wasn't.
was
I was
hoping
incredibly upset.
he was hoping that they'd change the rules like they did on the last day with the bad
Quite
weather.
right
And
too.
unfortunately,
And I felt a little embarrassed that I abandoned, but then I remembered Lance Armstrong didn't finish his first Tour de France either.
Good point. Neither did
There you
even
go.
Basser.
There you go. Hey, Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwen, Bob Roll, it's been great sharing time with you for 23
been our
very
pleasure.
long days. Well, that's going to do it for OLN's coverage of the 2005 Tour de France. Maybe not the great challenge to Lance Armstrong that we've come to expect, but nonetheless, he sets the bar so high it may be decades before anyone else even comes close, if ever. As we say goodbye from the Champs-Élysées, look back on the images and things that we'll remember from Lance's great ride to number 7.